Hey guys, Mitch Taco Bell here. We just finished Memorial Day weekend, and I happened to be on the road for 3 days. Every single flight I had, I talked about the giants who we've lost, and the reason that we have such a great country is for the sacrifice of those who have passed on before us. And I can't help but think back on all the losses that I've had in my life. All of us have had traumatic issues and different losses. I call it death on dying only because in my life, my first experience was losing my sister on February 25th, 1987. Um, she was coming back from a sorority mixer. She was drunk. She was sitting on a little bridge over this railroad tracks and on a cold February night in February with her boyfriend, and one of them lost their balance. They fell backwards, landed on the track. She was killed instantly. He was knocked unconscious when he came to. A train was coming, and he was last seen trying to pull her body off the tracks, even though he had a complete broken fracture, compound break on his leg. He managed to get her half on, half off. Train ran over her, hit him. He ended up surviving. So Marty's out there somewhere. If he ever sees this, know, Marty, that I hold no grudge, and I miss you, brother. So that happened, and then a year later, my roommate who got me through that tragic event, Steve Miller, he died in a fist fight outside of a bar in Philadelphia. He was a bit of a scrapper and was not one to stand down. He took a one shot to the temple, gave him an irreversible brain hemorrhage. He died in his sleep. And then a year after that, a guy drove his car through a telephone pole outside of my apartment in Pensacola, where I lived with Malcolm Andrews. And Malcolm and I went out. We couldn't get this guy out of the car, and we essentially watched him burn to death because the telephone pole he went through had crushed the engine and stuff back onto his legs. So for years, I can say that my mental gymnastics of how to deal with all that tragedy, it was very hard. I never had anybody to ever talk to about. And my good friend Schuster gave me a lead to a fantastic author, a doctor, and somebody who has survived the loss of her brother in January of 2004 in Iraq when his helicopter crashed. And I'm telling you right now that reading her book over the weekend took me back to a place and to situations that I haven't thought about in a long time. So I thought tonight would be a great night to have a glass of wine, to bring on Dawn, and we could both talk about a little bit about our siblings, because all of us know somebody who passed in the war, who died in a car wreck or cancer or something. But what we never really think about is the attachment to that one person. That may have been your friend, but how about the sibling? What the sibling went through. So, Dawn, I tell you what, I can't thank you enough for coming with me tonight to go through this journey, because I have to tell you that literally reading your book brought back so many emotions and so many things I haven't thought about in years, and great points as well. So I'm going to throw this out there. Anybody who has experienced the loss of a sibling, anyone who has a friend who died and they left a sibling behind, I highly encourage you to pick up Dawn's book. I put the link to her website, and you can order that on Amazon. You can get it from her website, whatever you need. It's good therapy. So Dawn, take us back to when Michael died. Everybody always kind of just give us a background, and then I'm going to hit you up with some questions.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. And I love that it's so close to Memorial Day. It feels like great timing. And we didn't even plan it like this. It just worked out like this, which is
No, it
very
worked out
cool.
great. It
Yeah.
really did. So first of all, here's to Michael. Here's
I
to
know.
all behind
Cheers.
them. Cheers.
I wish I actually had wine. Should have done that.
Well, you know what? I found this bottle at the store the other day. It's sweet red.
Wow, it's
It's
beautiful.
Lando Sweet Red, but they had me with the Iwo Jima, and they donate $4 a case to support our military veterans. $4 each case sold goes to K9 for workers. Anyway,
Nice. I'll have to look
good
out
drink.
for that one.
Yeah,
Okay, so take you back. Let's see.
take me back.
Ooh, it's a long time, 20 years this year, which is a long time. So 2004, and Michael is the youngest of three. So I'm the oldest, and I have a middle sister. And I was 28 at the time. Michael was 22. He had been in Iraq as a flight medic in the Army for almost a year. He was supposed to be home within about 6 weeks. Oh, there he is.
Great picture of you guys. Awesome family, by the way. Handsome
Oh,
guy.
thank you. Yeah, he was great. That was us visiting him in Colorado Springs before he got deployed, before he went over to Iraq. So I'm glad we were able to go out there.
Yeah.
And, we thought he was coming home. It's one of those situations where my sister actually called me at work. She had thought maybe my dad had already told me. And it wasn't until I answered the phone that she realized he had not reached me and she had to tell me. And I basically just froze and I didn't say anything. And she said, "You have to come home." I said, "Okay." I just kept saying, "Okay." And I went home. I live in Sacramento, California, and I went down to Southern California where my parents were living. And it just changed our world. It changed our family. You change so much as a person, and they call siblings the forgotten bereaved, the forgotten mourners, because so often everybody's focus is on the parents who've lost a child. And even your focus, a lot of time, my focus certainly was on trying to help my mom and trying to help my parents. And people don't realize. And in my 20s, I didn't know anyone besides my sister who lost a sibling. There was one book on sibling loss at the time. Thankfully, there's more now. But you just try to figure it out alone a lot of times. And that's obviously really, really hard to do. I am a psychologist, and I had just recently been licensed as a psychologist when I lost my brother. And so I was sort of a newer therapist. And eventually I went on to doing a lot of grief and loss work. And so now it's one of my specialties. So I talk to people who've lost kids, siblings, spouses, parents, all kinds of loss, as well as other stuff. I work with depression and anxiety and teenagers and
I'll
stuff
tell
like
you what,
that.
I wish I had you in college.
Mm,
My parents made me go see some doc or whatever, a counselor or whatnot on school. They made an appointment, said our son needs some grief therapy or something.
mm-hmm.
So I remember sitting down with this young lady, very nice, sweet gal, and I said, my sister's the one that you hear about because
Mm,
UVA and James Madison are just separated by a mountain. And so the news, as a matter of fact, that's how I found out my sister died. They had announced it she was just 15 days shy of her 20th birthday. So she's over 18. They announced her name, not knowing that her brother was right over the mountain. We listened to the same radio stations. And then she worked for the Arlington Police Department during the summers. So when the PAO in Arlington got the phone call, and his name is Tom Bell, no relation.
mm-hmm. Wow.
Tom took the phone call and he was like, "Okay, ready to copy. Notification next to Ken. Ready to copy." Her name's Susan Elizabeth Bell, and he just stopped writing because Susan worked for the chief,
Oh, wow.
and so he went into the chief's office and told the chief. And our next door neighbor, Lieutenant John Karenchak, drove and picked up my dad, and then they went and broke the news to my mom. And then they raced down Highway 81 to get to me at school, not knowing I had already left and went over the mountain and was at UVA hospital. And it was weird. I remember, and I'm going to ask you this. I came back. Did you destroy everything? What was your emotional outrage when you got the news?
I think I froze more than anything. I was literally on a plane within, I think, 2 or 3 hours, and I couldn't even believe I could drive. I was thinking, "How am I even able to drive right now?" And then as soon as I got home, it was just like nonstop crying with my mom. Like it was just
Yeah.
kind of chaos. And so my role in the family is to sort of be the, I don't know, the stronger one, if you will, or try to reassure everyone. And that's, I don't know how you do that after this. So it was more about me trying to help them figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Funeral arrangements.
Yeah.
I can remember being my dad was just crushed, and being at the funeral home, and the guy was like, "And we have this beautiful blue silk which would match your eyes, and we could
Mm,
line it, and for an extra $500 we could do this, and for an extra," it was like, and my dad's like, "Whatever, whatever, whatever."
right.
Finally, I'm like, "Look, we're having her cremated. Just
Um,
do a nice job and get this done, and take care of my dad,"
mhm.
Um, nickel diamond him to death. Death is expensive, but
Luckily, the military paid, I think, for everything, if I'm
yeah,
remembering that correctly. So that
yeah.
that helped. They
In
probably didn't
his
have to worry about that.
Yeah, in his case, for sure, death in the war. I just remember when I came back, I saw all these blinking lights on my answering machine, and you had the little cassettes, and it was like,
Mhm.
beep, you have 7 new messages. And it's like, hey, Mitch, hey, I heard some girl over at UVA died, fell off a bridge, got run over by a train. Her name was Susan Bell, same
Oh
name
my
as your
gosh.
sister. That's weird, small world. And I'm like, what? And after hearing a couple of these, I picked up the phone, I called her house, and her roommate, Elizabeth, um, it would ring, then it would go busy, it would ring. And I was like, there's no way this is not working. Finally, I got through, and Elizabeth goes, you need to speak to my dad, Mitchell. And her dad's British, and he was a doctor at UVA. And I remember he got on, he's like, Mitchell, there's been an accident. Your sister died today, this morning, around 2:25 a.m. And I, since I knew her, I identified the body, and so she's here at Charlottesville Hospital, and they're doing the autopsy and stuff. Um, Come over and then come to the house, and then we'll meet you at the hospital. And so I tore my room apart. I just remember spinning in the room, screaming,
Mhm.
the nose, this can't be, what the fuck? Excuse
Mhm.
my French. I mean, I went nuts, and I was flipping the coffee table,
Mhm.
and and I just remember my fraternity brothers in the house coming in, and they're like, what? Because I'm in the middle of the floor sobbing. I said, my sister's dead.
Mhm.
And they're like, what do you need? And I said, get me Steve, find Miller and get him. And so they went across campus somewhere. They found him, pulled him out of class. And then Miller drove with me over to UVA. And that's where my parents ended up meeting us. And then he drove me back. Um, I wouldn't let him drive on the way over, but I let me drive on the way back. And you're right. I don't know. I mean, I think I was doing 100 miles an hour. He never said a word. He just sat
Mhm.
there gripping as we went over the mountain. And I thought, I dare a cop to pull me over. I mean, this is an emergency.
Right.
And but I wasn't even thinking about myself or the harm I could have caused others if I had wrecked. Because I mean, you're out of your mind. Forget it.
Right.
Forget it that
Right. Well,
the
and I
harm you
think
could do others. Yeah.
right. And the response you had might have been a little more typical of how a young man would respond, right? So there's like a difference between how men and women respond to grief. And maybe women traditionally or stereotypically, I should say, are more likely to cry or talk about their feelings. But men are more likely to express anger or to not talk about their feelings, but to be irritable or quiet or get busy with stuff. And sometimes people don't realize that that man is grieving because they're not just crying or talking about their feelings. So I think that can be
Yeah.
hard too.
And we don't cry much. I guess I'm getting
It
I'm
depends
so
on the guy.
yeah. I mean, I mean, fast forward, every day I came home from class, I would just crawl up into my loft and
Mm,
just sob for an hour.
yeah.
And
Did you take time off school or
no, no, I didn't.
wow.
It was tough because I came back. It was right before spring break, and I told you this on the phone. I was not going to come back to school. I had in my mind that I'm going to take some time off. Miller, Steve Miller, so there were two Steves, Steve Lou, Steve Miller. Miller drove up to DC, and he grabbed me and he said, "This was after the funeral," and he goes, "Look, I sold spring break trips, and I had bought one for my sister and I to go to Key West with everybody."
Mm,
And he came up and he goes, "Your sister would want you to still go to spring break. Your sister loves you. She wants her Marine brother. And if you drop out of school, you will lose your flight slot." And
mm,
I'm like, I never thought about it that way. And I had this book that she had written, "So Proud of My Marine Air Brother," Love Susan. She gave it to me for Christmas. And I thought about it and I was like, she's right. If I, it's kind of like Top Gun when he was like, "What are my options?" And he goes, "Well, what happened to you would crush anybody. You can leave with pride that you did a good job, or you can
right.
stick it out and graduate." And that's what I did. I stuck it out and graduated.
Wow.
But that was hard too. I mean, I told you that story. In your book, you have it in chapter 6. I believe you talk about how do you how do you broach the subject? How do you talk about your sibling as a single person? You're trying to date or whatever.
Mm,
How do you
mhm,
talk to somebody about that loss? And how do you bring it up in a way that doesn't make them feel icky, doesn't make you seem callous,
right.
doesn't do that? That took that definitely took a long time to develop that trait. Some interviews you had in the end of the book, people talked about that as well. I would
Mhm,
judge how the conversation was going before I would open up my heart and let it out.
mhm,
And I got to the point where I denied I even had a sister. You
mm,
know, how many siblings? How many? Do you have a brother, sister? No, I'm an only child. Which, in fact, I'm an only child. But I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want to have to deal with the painful questions. Well, how did she die? Was she hit by a drunk driver? No, she was drunk.
mm,
She fell off a bridge, got run over by an Amtrak train.
right.
What? And then that opened up all the can of
Mhm,
worms. So
right. No,
yeah.
it's interesting you bring that up. My sister was dating. I was in a relationship and with my boyfriend who's now my husband, but she specifically talked about that she stopped telling people on dates about my brother or if they asked, how many siblings do you have? Because she said, when you're dating, you date someone for, a month or two, that's part of dating, and it was just too painful to keep telling the story. And so with her now husband, she didn't tell him for a while, and he eventually said, are you going to tell me, like, I see pictures, you haven't mentioned a brother in your family pictures, can you tell me about that? And of course she eventually did, and they're married now and have 2 kids, and but it reminds me of the saying, I think it's Brene Brown, it says people, they have to earn the right to your story, and
Mhm.
that they don't just get to know your hurts and most vulnerable, painful situations. They earn the right to that. And so some of it's timing, or if someone else expresses that they have any experience with grief or loss, that makes it easier. Like, oh, that, this place of losing a sibling, or and then that changes it too. But it's
I've
really
noticed that
hard.
if you just straight out and tell them, that cuts all the question. I mean, and you say it in a way that's inviting. You're like, I'm not. It keeps her memory alive, right? Keeps Miller's memory
Mhm,
alive. It keeps
mhm.
anybody that I know that has died alive to say their name. And
Yep.
oh my God, so I just lost my train of thought of what I was going to say to you because it was just it was
Well, maybe it gets
about that.
easier because that's what I was thinking, right? In the beginning, it's so hard to navigate. How do I answer these questions? What do I say? What do I do? And that is what I feel like in time, it's so much easier now if people ask how many siblings do I have? depending on the situation. I have a sister, and I lost my brother when he was 22. I might not say that at the grocery store. It like depends on where I am, but if if I'm really going to talk to someone, and then maybe they'll ask questions, maybe they won't, but that question gets easier in time. And how to even live with loss. I always say, I said this in the book, it's not something you just get over or move on. You change as a human being, your family changes, and you learn to live with the loss of a sibling. That's my truth anyway.
Well, you're right. It does get easier as time goes on, and you polish your answer on how it dictates. But some of the crazy stuff I remember hearing was, "Oh, I know how you feel. My grandfather died, or
Oh
my
yeah,
dog died. My dog died. I know how you feel." And I'm like, "You have no clue."
I know.
You lose somebody that's 14 months younger than you, your best friend in life, all the secrets and all the stuff you shared. And, I can remember in the car, 1976, driving up to the Olympics, and we're in the back, and we had a notepad, and we were writing down 1976, 1977, 78, 79, all the way to like 2000, how old we were going to be. My dad got married at 27. I'm going to get married when I'm 27, and all those things that we shared. You know, your son, we ended up when my wife Teresa and we got married, um, and we were blessed with our first child. I asked her, "Would you mind if I named her after Susan in honor of my sister?" And she was like, "Absolutely." So our first daughter is named after Susan, and you named your son after Michael?
No, so my daughter is Michaela, so
Oh,
the
Michaela.
feminine version of Michael. Yeah. So my firstborn is Michaela.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
awesome. Well,
Yeah, it feels good to do that.
it does. It does. And it's what was the craziest thing that I think you've ever heard? Have you ever heard when you're discussing this before you became a professional? If you're just sitting there talking to somebody at a bar, any
What
crazy any crazy stories? I mean, anywhere from my dog died to no, my brother was killed by a drunk driver, which opened up a whole wow. All of a sudden, you guys share the same T-shirt. You're in the T-shirt club that nobody else has.
Wait, are you asking me what's the craziest thing I've
Yeah,
heard
what's the craziest thing you've ever heard?
in response to me losing my brother?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know, because I hear all kinds of crazy stuff I'm not allowed to share as therapist, right? But
Yeah.
ooh, I don't know. I can't remember, but I think that I just I don't know. I put this wasn't to me, but in the book, the comments that people told I interviewed 14 people for the book. And when
Right.
people would say things like, God can only give you what you can handle, or, if people had a lot of siblings, they would be told, well, at least you have a lot of other siblings. Like, and I know people, and I believe people mean well, but their comments are so hurtful when they minimize, somebody's loss because they have a lot of other siblings that, you don't need the other one that passed or something like that. I don't know if I received anything that was super hurtful. I just think people don't understand. And I think when they compare the loss to they lost a friend or they lost their pet, and it was maybe the worst thing that they've gone through. But the difference when you lose a sibling, not only do you lose someone you grew up with and you thought you had a future with, so you feel robbed of, I still feel robbed of nieces and nephews I might have had, cousins my kids might have had, a whole life with my brother,
Yeah.
helping with aging parents, all this stuff that you don't get to have. So you feel robbed. But then your parents are so devastated and are so different for years. So, I called it double trauma in the book. Like, you're dealing with the loss of a sibling and often under supported in that. And then your parents are devastated and you kind of lose them for a while too. And I know families all grieve differently. So I know for other families, maybe parents aren't grieving the way siblings grieving or whatnot. It's kind of a hot mess really to navigate through. But it's a lot. It's a lot for anybody to go through. And that's what's different if then someone just loses a pet, but your family probably was impacted by, I mean, maybe they were, but
Well,
I
at the
don't know.
time, that is the
And I
most
don't want to like
devastating
compare
thing.
everything, but it's different.
Yeah, at the time, that was the most
Right.
devastating thing that had ever happened to them. So I don't
Right.
I used to resent hearing that. I mean, I not get angry or anything, but I would just tune you out after
Right.
hearing that. But then
Right.
after a while, I realized, when somebody would say something like that, they were trying to find a commonality with you
Right.
to to to
To
understand and
connect. Right.
to
They're
connect,
trying to
and
relate.
I have
Hmm.
no grievance with that at all. It's just something
Right.
they don't realize, and I think back on it, Angela Angela Delaney died in a car wreck when she was 16. Girl I knew back in, junior high. And then, another kid died, spinal meningitis at school when I was in
Wow.
high school. And those are really the only 2 people that I knew who died, but I didn't know their sisters or brothers really well, so I didn't know what they went through. And then after Susan died, you're absolutely right. You're there trying to take care of your parents and all the emotional stuff they're going through. My parents found solace in Compassionate Friends.
Mm.
That organization helped them beyond words in terms of dealing with the loss of their child. And I know there are so many SOS suicide survivors, or there's so
Hmm.
many different groups out there for either, you can find a group for anything, but if somebody has experienced that, especially as a parent or an adult or a sibling, I know that now we're starting the sibling group, Compassionate Friends, and the sibling chapters. I recommend getting people involved in that only because when they do choose to open up, they'll be within the safe zone of people who have also the same feelings and the same, experiences. Seriously, as I read your book, I'm going, The Call. And I'm like, I remember that. How
Right.
do I deal with telling about my sibling to others? I remember that. You know,
Hmm.
experiences that you've had, dreams and stuff.
Hmm.
We'll get into that too because that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, the um, the whole deal with that loss, you just yeah. All right, I'm gonna take you back. That night that she died, I came home and I was driving home, and I remember seeing an 18-wheeler pulled over on the side of the road with his flashers on, and I thought, I can't live without my sister.
Mm.
And the thought flashed to my mind, I'm going to drive right into the back of this parked car and just kill myself too.
Hmm.
But I thought, there's no way that my parents
Right.
could survive the loss of both kids.
Right.
Got home that night. I'm sitting on the couch, and we had a little Shih Tzu dog. And the dog, Susan taught him all these tricks, sit,
Hmm.
roll over, bang, play dead, the whole 9 yards. Smart dog. Well, I'm sitting on the couch watching TV. My parents, somebody had given them some I don't know, prescription stuff, and they went to bed. And the dog walks over to the chair that's kind of across from me, sits down, looks at the chair, shakes, gets up on the hind legs, lays back, does all the, and then gets up and just staring at the chair. And
Mm.
I had a feeling of my sister was there, and it was a
Hmm.
comforting deal.
It gives me the chills.
I'm kind of
Mm.
getting. I haven't thought about this in a long time, and that was the first thing that ever happened, and it was just fleeting. It wasn't that long, and then it was a year later during finals. So I was a senior. I went home and I took a nap in between finals, and in this dream, we were standing in the mattress and bed springs, box spring was gone, and we're standing in the middle of her bed frame, And on the shelf, she had all of these little dolls that my dad had bought. He was a Navy officer, when he was on a ship going around the world in Italy and, you know, Spain, and he would pick up these little dolls for Susan. And we're taking all the dolls down, we're putting them in a box with a layered newspaper, and until we got all the dolls off the shelf and we put them in there. And then we gave each other a big hug, and she goes, I'm really going to miss her. And I go, yeah, I'm going to miss her too. And we hugged each other. And I woke up and I was crying in my sleep. My pillow was wet. I go home. That was a Wednesday. I go home on Friday. I go throw my bag up on the bed, and I go in Susan's room, open the door, and all the dolls are gone, and they're all replaced with books. And I run downstairs. I'm like, Mom, what did you do with the dolls? And she goes, oh, I put them in a box. One day, if you ever have kids, you can give them to your kids. I go, when did you do this? And she goes, on Wednesday, I think. Yeah, Wednesday. I'm like,
Wow.
how weird was that? And
Wow.
and then I craved those moments where, maybe I look forward to going to sleep, that I would have, another interaction with her. Now, fast forward, have you ever watched a movie called Always with Richard Dreyfuss, Holly Hunter? Oh my God, Dawn, you
I need
need
to
to
see it,
watch.
huh?
All
Okay.
right,
Write
yes.
it down.
So
Always.
John Goodman, Holly Hunter, Richard Dreyfuss. It's based off an old World War II film called A Guy Named Joe. I think it's A Guy Named Joe with Spencer Tracy. And it's these pilots, and the one pilot saves his buddy from blowing up, and in doing so, he dies. And he and Holly Hunter are an item. Well, when he dies, he's up in heaven, and she's talking to him. She says, "Hey, we're going to give you a chance to come back and become like a guardian angel to a fledgling pilot." And he's like, "I always thought I did this." No, you weren't alone. There was somebody helping you. So he becomes like a guardian angel. But the thing is, he goes right back down, and a day in heaven could be 5 years. So I took a girl on a date to go see that movie. I think it was like 1989. I just remember bawling because there's a scene where Richard Dreyfuss is talking to her, Holly Hunter, in her sleep. She's asleep. She's laying there. There's a fire going. And he's talking to her, and she replies. And he realizes, he goes, "You can hear me?" She's like, "Yeah, I hear you."
Oh, wow.
And they're having this conversation. And then that dawned on me that maybe perhaps that was what I had, that she could come back and be able to do that. But I'll tell you, have you ever had anything like that with Michael?
Yeah. I had a number of dreams with him. One of the most meaningful dreams is we were sitting at my parents' in my dream. We're sitting at my parents' kitchen table, and my brother and my husband were sitting there. And I realized in the dream, oh, you guys haven't met in real life. That's right, because they hadn't.
Right.
Michael's in Iraq, and my husband Josh knew about him, but they had never met. And so in the dream, I said, "Oh, Michael, this is Josh. Josh, this is Michael." And they shook hands. And I was like, oh my God, it just felt super meaningful to me. And I had a lot of other dreams where he, for some reason, was younger a lot of the times in the dreams. And I remember thinking in the dream, I wonder if he knows that he died. And I wonder when he has to go back. That's what it felt like. It felt like he was visiting me, but eventually he'd have to go back, and I'd have to wake up. And they say that some dreams are like visits, and I believe that. And I believe when you watch your dog that's clearly interacting with someone or something that could easily, I believe that was your sister. And I had several people tell me who had, they say that dogs or animals and small children can see spirits. And I had several people tell me their children who didn't know Michael would be like high-fiving or interacting again with someone. And they said, "What are you doing? Who are you playing with?" And they said, "Michael."
Oh, wow.
They never met Michael. They didn't know Michael. But they said his name, and the parents would then say, "You won't believe what just happened." So it helps me I like believing that, our spirits continue and we're still connected. And, I think it's harder for us because, we're sort of more aware of time. I think time is different where they are. And someday my hope is that we get to understand the bigger picture. Why did we have to go through this, and what was it about, or that we're together again? So, that's my
Yeah.
hope anyhow.
Yeah. Do you ever mediums? You kind of
Mm.
talked about that in the book, mediums.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I've always wanted to do something if I could find somebody that was trustworthy, because I believe there are people that have gifts. I believe that there
Right.
are folks that are like what's her name? Patrick Swayze and Whoopi
Right.
Goldberg,
Yep.
that can
Yep.
hear spirits or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I believe
Yeah.
that maybe it's a different plane, a dimension our energy goes to. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I
Well,
would
this
love to do.
medium that we saw a medium for a long time, and it helped significantly. And it was cool because you could watch him literally look over your shoulder, and he's like interacting, he's talking, and then he'd tell us, and does that make sense? And it was very validating, and it kind of just helped get us through. Like, okay, he knows what's going on in our life. He's okay, you know. But the person I saw, you could do a phone appointment with. I don't think he does Zoom video appointments, but I've done phone appointments, and it was really good. I think it's nicer, especially for the first time, to see someone in person so that you could watch the medium interacting.
Hmm.
But it's really important you go to the right person, because there's a big range in the level of talent, and some people are much better. And I've seen several different mediums at this point, and some of them, they're just not as good. They'll
Yeah,
ask for a picture, they'll ask for a name. And the person we saw consistently, he wouldn't ask for any of that. He doesn't want any information at all, nothing.
right.
And so he gives all the information, so it's much more validating. But I don't think everyone's that skilled. So, other people maybe need a little more help with it.
Well, I definitely believe it. I mean, I lived in a little house in North Carolina, right on the backside of a Civil War battle line, which I didn't realize until
Mm,
one day I'm having coffee and I see this dude out there with a metal detector. I'm like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. This is a big Civil War battle line. The reserves were up where you live, and the regulars were down closer
wow.
to the river. The Yankees came down. They drove the troops into the river, and I mean, just massacred tons of people." And all of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh my god!" Because one night I lived with two guys, two other pilots, and one night I'm laying in bed, and I hear Rick, my roommate. Actually, I just had Rick at that time. Rick, my roommate, was overseas. He was in Rota, Spain, and I hear the dishes moving in the sink. Like, you moving a pan around. My
Right.
door was open. All of a sudden, I hear this, and I've got a 70, 80-pound Dalmatian who she was mean as hell. I mean, but she was a very protective dog. Not mean I mean, mean to a stranger. Somebody broke in the house is mean.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, she would lick you to death otherwise. But Dale was on the bed. She slept with me on the bed, and she's sitting there like this, and she's going,
Wow.
get him, Dale. And the dog's like, and just sitting there growling. So I reach in my drawer and I grab my 45, slide it, grab my flashlight, and I'm
Wow.
walking down the hallway. Now, this is not a very big house, right? 1,800 square foot house. And I'm
Mm.
walking down the hallway, and as I'm walking down, I can hear that sound of bare feet on linoleum,
Wow.
walking on linoleum. And I can hear some stuff moving around by the sink. And we had, when you walk, the living room was here, and there was a counter that had a couple stools, and then you could serve over the counter if you wanted or whatever. Well, I walk and I click the light on, and I've got the 45, and I'm like this, and I don't see anything. I don't see anybody standing up
Wow.
my height, and I'm scanning. Now I'm thinking, son of a bitch is down squatted, and so I pop over the counter, and I'm looking like this, nobody.
Wow.
And now I get this hair up my back, on my neck, and I think, holy shit, he's behind me, and I spin around, nothing. I check all the doors, they're all locked. I did not go back to sleep that night. So I'm in my room. And dog wouldn't leave the room, not till next morning. But I closed the door, locked it, had my 45, had the light, and I was just spooked.
Wow.
Well, then Later, I had another roommate who I had one of those first cordless phones, with the antenna that was 2 feet long.
Mhm.
You walk around the house. Well, this dumb shit would go into my room. He would grab my phone at night and he would talk to his girlfriend, and then he would leave it off the charger. So when I wanted to use it, it was dead. And one night the door opens up and I'm laying on my left side and the window's right here with the woods where the Civil War battle line was. It was just woods. And so I left the blinds open and the moonlight was coming in and I'm laying on my left side and I hear the door handle jingle and I knew he was coming in and I rolled over to go, Neil. And I look and it's a shadow of a dude about 6'2" and Neil's maybe 5'8".
Mm.
And I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, and he was walking towards me and he stopped. This black figure. And I'm sitting there and I'm like,
Oh my
and I'm
gosh.
thinking, all these thoughts going through my mind. My gun's in the nightstand, and right as I was reaching for the nightstand, I'm like, no, I'll get the light. And I got the light because the guy had turned around, was walking back right as he got his hand on the door handle. I turned the light on, he was gone, and the door was closed. So now I'm really kind of spooked. And later, maybe about a month or two after that, I was fixing to move, and I started talking to my two roommates, Ed and Neil, and I'm like, "Have you guys ever experienced anything kind of strange in the house?" And they go, "Define strange."
Oh,
Yeah,
yep.
and so I tell them those two incidents I had, and Neil's like, "Holy shit! Jesus, you were gone. You were on a trip." And I'm in my room, and all of a sudden I hear banjo music playing, and it's coming from
What?
your room. I mean, like banjo. I can hear the guy playing the banjo, and it's just no famous tune or anything. It's just banjo playing. And it wasn't super loud, but it sounded like it was right there. And I get up and I open the door and I open your door and the music stops. I'm like,
Wow.
all right, that's
Wow.
weird. So I close the door, go back to my room. Music starts playing again. So I go and open your door and the music stops. Now I'm thinking, you son of a bitch, Taco, you have put a motion sensor in there so that when the door opens, the music stops. So he went and unplugged my stereo. He unplugged my radio.
Great.
He did all that stuff. Then he goes back in the room and music starts playing again. And then he starts screaming, "Stop! I can't stand it. Stop!" And the other guy had an experience with somebody, moving something right next to him watching TV. And he thought, this is bizarre. So I do believe that there are spirits that get trapped here. And, those
Mhm.
experiences are kind of cool in a way. I just hope that they make it to wherever they need to go. But
Right.
yeah, I mean,
Wow.
go live on. I could tell you, go live on a Civil War battle line. You're probably gonna go see some, or we're going to Normandy D-Day next week. Probably gonna see some
Yeah.
spirits at night out there.
Right. Wow. I mean, I had something weird happen in my office. Not I don't know, but I was in the middle of a session and it happened to be a pretty intense grief and loss session. And out of nowhere, my Pandora music starts playing what I call a Michael song, a song that
Oh,
is completely like we put it on the CDs, back in 2004, you made CDs
yeah.
for weddings or funerals or whatever. And so it was what was that song? I can't I can't remember, but I had to literally get up and I was like, I'm so sorry. I need to shut off the music. It's never happened since. And I mean, what are the chances? So even for someone who's like, okay, well, that can happen. All right. So if you want to talk numbers and statistics, there are hundreds of different songs that could have been played. It's going to be a song that's about my brother, like
Yeah,
during a grief and loss session. Like
yeah.
like that's a
Oh,
pretty low probability right there. So, um, it's interesting when these things happen. I like to believe that, that our loved ones absolutely continue and exist. And, you know, it is interesting when spirits, are still going around a house.
yeah.
But most of the time, I think it's, just wanting
You,
to say hello or pop back in and whatnot.
you know what's funny? You said, "Give me a sign." I
Hmm.
remember driving home one night. I was out in the country driving back to Quantico, and it was a beautiful starry night. And I'm on a straightaway back road, so there are no lights, just me, myself, and I cruising down the road. And I'm looking at this field of stars up ahead. Beautiful night. And I just said, "Hey, Susan, how about giving me a sign?" And all of a sudden, this shooting star goes right across from upper left to lower right, right across the sky, night sky, bright as could be. And I'm like, "Yeah!" And I go, "Steve, how about you? Give me a sign." And another shooting star comes the other way.
Wow.
So I had literally within minutes had shooting stars going like that within probably easily 2 minutes of each other. It was probably a big meteorite storm or whatever, but I said it happened, and that little things like that have happened throughout the years that I go, give me the strength, Lord. Steve, give me your strength. He was captain of the swim team. I'm like, give me your strength to pass through this. Or Susan, she was got the 1550 on the SATs back when it was 1600 max. Smart as hell.
Wow.
Susan, give me your brains just for a minute so I can pass this one exam. Please give me the stamina.
Wow.
And I've always felt that comfort, that's you get from that. Oh boy.
You should definitely go to a medium, and then you have to tell me about it. That would be amazing.
I will. The only experience I've ever had with a medium was sitting at work one day back in like 96, and I flew college kids around in the Marine Corps. I rented airplanes. I would take college kids up on joyrides and try to entice them to be aviators. And I'm sitting there and listening to this guy they had this guy on the phone from California, and he, just by talking to you, could tell you what you were in your past life. And I found this fascinating because he would talk to some lady and he'd be like, "Well, you were part of the, you were in 1800, you were a mistress to a slave owner in Louisiana and blah, 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 blah." And then it's like, "So where do you live?" "Well, I live in, Missouri, but my family's from Mississippi." And yeah, they grew up on these farms and stuff. And anyway, I'm like, "This is bullshit, but I'm going to do it." So I call. And they go, "What is your name?" And I said, "Mitchell." And they go, "What's your age?" And I'm like, 28. And that's all I said. And so they go, "Okay, we got Mitch on board. He's 28 years old. Go ahead." And the guy goes, "Well, Mitch, I can tell you right now that you got an affinity for flying. In your past life, you were a barnstormer. You used to give airplane rides to people. And you used to love flying, and you would take these airplanes out and you would give people a little ride around the pattern type deal. Blah, blah, blah. You never died while you were flying, but you just love flying." Now I'm sitting there speechless. My boss is sitting across from me because we share an office, and he's like, "What the fudge?" And they go, "Okay, Mitch, what do you do for a living?" I go, "I am a Marine Corps aviator, and I give college kids airplane rides."
Wow.
And they're just like, "Woohoo! Another one!" And then that was it. "All right, thanks for playing, Mitch. Goodbye." This is in 95. There's no internet. The guy didn't know my last name. If he'd come up with, "Well, you were a doctor in your past life," I would have been like, "Oh, that's interesting." But to say you were an aviator gives me hope that one day when I die, maybe like in Always, maybe I come back in another dimension and I'm helping some poor guy going through flying lessons in 1930, which would be a fascinating era of aviation to be in.
Right? Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It's
about you?
fascinating.
Do you have a past life?
Oh my gosh. It's funny you ask, because I'm listening to this book right now called Journey of Souls. And it's so much detail about what happens to, our soul comes out of our body, and then what we go through before you even get to another life, just this whole process. And it's wild. And it's really interesting. And I don't even want to know yet, actually. Like, my own life is so exhausting right now. I'm like, you know what? One life at a time. It's very full, raising kids. I don't know. I mean, I think it's wildly interesting. And I don't know. I don't want to rush through this life, but I do someday, I guess, look forward to understanding how does this really all go together. Like we get this little piece of this a much, much bigger puzzle. And I want to know the whole puzzle, not just like the little pieces. And in my work as a therapist, I work with people and I'm hearing about struggle and suffering all the time. And it's really, why is that? Why do people go through what they go through? And what's it all about? And again, I think we only have some of the information.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when people have phobias that really can't be explained from any of this current life situation, that a lot of times they find in a past life something happened and that's why they have a phobia. But I think all kinds of things are possible, but I'm just not ready yet to know what I will tell you this. This is my educated guess, because for whatever reason, I don't like to cook, and the kitchen is not a natural environment for me. Like I hurt myself. I feel like all disoriented.
Yeah.
And I think maybe I was, I don't know if I was royalty or somewhere where I had like servants or something in a past life, whereas this life, I can't even like figure out how to make food for myself very easily without burning myself and stuff. So
Well,
maybe that's possible.
All I pray is that when we do move on and we go into the next dimension, heaven, whatever it is, there are no dentists. I hope that that would be reserved strictly for hell. Have some guy grind on your teeth all day, and at night they regrow, and then next day he goes in there, starts drilling, and you smell the burned flesh, and that's hell to me. So in heaven there are no dentists, and we never have to go get a cavity filled. How about that?
Right, and there's cheesecake and no calories. That's what I would like to do. No calories in heaven.
Oh my God. Well,
yep.
I wanted to ask if anybody had, it's between 9 and 15 people between a couple different platforms have been watching. If anybody has any questions, I do know Caleb, Travis, here we go. Don, and you as well. Taco, I didn't know Michael, but his story lived on. I was a witch doctor from 06 to 09.
Oh, wow. Oh, man. Oh, that picture. I don't know if you posted. Literally says witch doctor on the helicopter that
right there.
See it. Wow.
Yep, right
Thank
there.
you, Travis. Oh my goodness gracious.
And you know what's funny? Here, I found my old picture.
Oh my gosh.
And if any of my RTAG buddies know these guys, it's been almost 20 some years, so 20 years, but I was taking cigars. Those guys used to take us up flying, and we would go cruise around in their Black Hawk and do test flights. And they had a machine gun on it, and we'd go shoot at the targets and stuff just to play around with it. Oh no, I take that back. No, those guys, I think they just took us flying. It was the UE guys that would let us go test fire the machine guns. But yeah, that's a great picture of those guys. And then this is a great picture of your family right before. Was this on vacation?
Yep, that was in Colorado Springs, Red Rock. That was we visited Michael before he was deployed. Right before he went to Iraq, we went out there, and I'm so glad we did. That was our last family picture, which unfortunately, but I'm glad we have it. Okay, so I have to say, so I see the comments. Ben Hiram, doggies and kitties are not animals, they're people too. You have to know, I have 2 cats and a dog, and we literally call our dog our third child because it's so ridiculous. The dog is like sleeps in our bed, under our covers. It's like embarrassing. So I love our animals. So I'm not hating on animals.
No, I'm
or
not
dentists.
Either. I'm hating on dentists.
Thank you, Melanie.
I hate all you
dentists.
I hate all you dentists. Oh yeah, I've hung listening to you. Now you're hating on me as a dentist. Oh, Melanie, yes, I am. When you're doing drilling the teeth, I gotta hate on you. My jaw hurts. The smell kills me. So.
And the sound is hard. That I need to bring headphones next time. I'm like, oh my God, this hurts my ears.
You can't wear headphones. I was trying to listen to a podcast, and the drilling vibrates, and you can't hear. So, Melanie, love you. Thank you for what you do for us in this world. I just hope in the next world that you don't have a job, we'll make you a pilot. How about that? Ben, past life as an aviator. Richard Dreyfuss in movies. Always. I was just talking about that, Ben. that is one of my favorite movies. Of course, they fly in PBYs and A-26 intruders. Oh, that's just an awesome movie.
Wow.
Let's see, we got Travis here. Thank you for your story. Oh yeah, yeah. Witch Doctor. Um,
Hmm.
just finished up hosting a Marine weekend who lost a buddy in Iraq and comes to Shargan Falls, Iowa to pay his respects to almost every Memorial Day. Name's Jerry, and the boy he has a story to tell. I'm sorry to hear about what happened to your sister. You know what? It defines us. It becomes stories that help define us as a person. Elaine Hogan. Elaine, this was kind of a neat story. Elaine in the 70s. So I lived in Little Creek on Little Creek Amphibious Base in the 70s. My dad was Navy, and we had this little tiny cottage that was built in the 40s, and that's what we lived in, officer housing.
Mm.
In college, so this would have been like in late 87, 88, I drove down to Little Creek and I went to go visit my old neighborhood. And I walked up to Elaine was living in our house. And I walked up, knocked on the door, and I just said, I said, "Hi, ma'am. You don't know me. I'm Mitchell Bell. I grew up here 71 to 77, and this was my house. And, let me tell you about the stuff." And I told her how they built the addition on the back. And when they did the restoration of the master bedroom, when it got AC, I was telling her all this stuff. And I said, and my room was the middle room. And there was a broken hook where you'd hang a jacket, one of those things. They had a bunch of hooks on there. You could hang your clothes, jackets on the wall. I said, there's a broken hook because I stepped on it and broke that tip off trying to climb up to get something off the shelf. And she goes, that's still there. And she took me into the house and showed me the closet, and there it
Wow.
was broken. And she told her kid, she goes, hey, this is Mitchell. He broke that, So funny.
That's funny.
So, hey, good to see you on here, Elaine. Debbie, I guess maybe she was just trying to tag somebody in that. But, I feel like I've gotten free therapy from you, Dawn, and I want to say thank you first of all from the bottom of my heart.
Mm.
I don't know about you, but having, as I explained in the beginning, lost 3 people in 3 years, 1 a year.
Right.
2 that really mattered to me. 1 I did know, but it affected me in a different way. Those 3 things, I was afraid of getting close to anybody. So if I started dating a girl and we got within 3, 6 months, something like that, I felt like if I got too close to this person, they would die. I'm going to
Mm.
lose somebody again, have to deal with this. And it wasn't until my 30s. It's about 33, and I was sitting on the back porch, and I was just sitting there saying some prayers one night, looking up at the stars, and I just said, God, I want to meet somebody that I could share my life with and have kids and do all this stuff. And then I met my wife, and it took me 2 years to get her to date me. But once we started going out, I was just like, this is the girl I'm marrying. I'm in love. This is it. And my attitude I'm not the same person that I was young, free, 25-year-old Mitch doing bullfight. I used to do some really stupid shit. I got hit by a bull in Portugal.
Oh,
We're doing the
jeez.
bullfights and stuff.
Oh.
Skydiving, rock climbing, stupid, high risk things
Mm-hmm.
because I thought, well, I'm going to die anyway. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
join my sister. It doesn't matter to me.
Mm.
I don't know if you ever went through that phase in your life, but I definitely went through a phase in my life where I just didn't give a crap and I was selfish. And I did a lot of extreme things that I probably shouldn't have. Maybe that's a guy thing. I
Well,
don't know.
I think it is a guy thing, but I also think that I worried about what you worried about in terms of I can't have my parents go through the loss of another kid, right? So I thought about that. But if I'm being totally honest, when we were all on a plane together, my parents, my sister, and I was like, if the plane went down and we're all on it, I'd be okay with that, just so the universe knows, right? The plane
Yeah,
did not
yeah.
go down, so I had that thought, which is kind of more of a passive thought of dying or wish, if you will, but
Right.
it's super tough. Oh, we see Mark Schuster's on here. So he
There we
wants me
go.
to. Yep.
Tell
Do
everyone
you want
about
to?
Michael's clinic. Yeah, please. Tell us about
Okay,
Michael's clinic
so
in person.
the army named one of their medical clinics after Michael. I think it's the DiRaimondo Family Medical Clinic, which is amazing. It's been there for a long time now. And I have to, Mark has been incredible. I'm going to embarrass him now, but Mark didn't even know our family or Michael and reached out when he heard we were living in Simi Valley. And he reached out and just said, "Hey, what can we do for you?" And I mean, and he's such a perfect example. And I talked about him in my book, that there are so many also unexpected blessings that happen. Like some of the people you think will be there aren't always there after you lose someone or a sibling. And then people you never ever saw coming. And Mark is like an amazing example of that. And he helped support our family and still does, just incredibly. And now is like a part of our family. Mark, thank you. We
Yes.
love you and are
I
so
like
grateful.
I like to say that Mark is my manager. He called me up about you and goes, "Hey, I got this great gal you need to talk to. Her brother was Army, died in Iraq," and and I'm thinking, "Okay, Gold Star, sibling. Oh, this will be cool." And then, no, she's written a book and it's about loss of siblings. And I'm like, now you piqued my interest because you and I
Mm,
have definitely been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. So, um, Mark,
mhm,
thank you again, brother, for what you've done. Something I want to also say, when we deal with somebody who has gone through this, what do you say type thing, right? Well, I can tell you some people are very reluctant to broach the subject every year during an anniversary or birthday or anything. And I am here to tell you that that is the complete opposite of what you need to do. Nothing makes you, Vicki McGinnis, Jocelyn File, our friends, Malcolm Andrews, Rachel Renzi, all these people will send messages to my mom and dad during Susan's birthday or her anniversary in
mhm.
February, or just messages. I'm thinking about Susan today, and here's a story that you probably don't know, and those messages keep them alive. Don't ever, if you hear me talking right now, please do not ever, ever, ever be reluctant to bring up their name, to call them up out of the blue and go, "Hey, I just want to let you know I was thinking about Steve today,"
Mhm,
or I, was-
mhm.
let me tell you about something he did that was kind of funny, and I just totally forgot about it. Um, Parents love hearing that. Siblings love
Right.
hearing that. Sharing pictures out of the blue
Mm. The
of your
best are the
siblings.
pictures you never saw, right? And you're like,
Right.
"Oh my gosh, it's such a gift." I haven't seen that. I haven't seen it in years, or I've never seen that picture before. It's great.
You know what sucks is Susan died in '87. That we didn't have movies. In the
Um,
movies they had back then had no sound. You had the little
mm,
16 millimeters. Um, so I have photos of my sister, but I can't hear her voice because we don't have video. I mean, we
you know
have,
what I did? I kept our answering machine, his messages to me. I mean, no one uses an answering machine anymore, right?
yeah,
But I
yeah.
actually still have it plugged in so that I haven't listened to it in a while, but I'd hear him, "Hi, Dawn. This is your brother,
Oh,
Michael. Yeah, just calling to say hi," just to hear his voice, right? And now on my
yeah.
cell phone, I save messages
Just so,
because you're like, this is a good one in case I
yeah.
ever need to hear it when you're not here someday. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure like other people, or else like normal people maybe don't think like that, but I do now and have for a long time. I'll save messages,
And
right?
that's a great idea. Actually, download them as a file, as a WAV file, and put them away
That's
because
smart.
I mean, there are so many ways now that you have video, TikTok video. I mean, I
Right.
created this podcast thinking that if I died of COVID, at least maybe my kids would hear some stories. Well, it was during COVID I started it. I was bored.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
if my kids
I
might
wrote
hear
the
my
book during
voice.
COVID. Look at these things we created during it took a pandemic, but we got there. Okay.
And yeah, and you did a great job too. So maybe
And so you
everyone's
still
always like,
have this, right? So your
I
podcast's still going on 4 years later.
the podcast is still rolling. I've got Shu as a manager finding me great guests that life is good, right? And what did he say?
Wow.
Your dad married me?
Yes, I
Dad
forgot
married me and Mary in
and I thought
2013.
yes. So my dad was the officiant and married him and his amazing wife, Mary. That's right.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go.
I think my kids were like, weren't my kids in the wedding too, Mar? Or at least my daughter was like flower girl. Maybe I'm just making that
So
up,
many
but I
years
think
ago.
so. I
Yeah,
know.
so many years have passed. Well, Dawn, if there's anything that I could ever do to help you,
Mm.
please feel free, give me a shout, and thank you for my free therapy lesson tonight. Um, my wife will probably be going, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, man."
What?
Because it was funny. I was sitting at dinner, you and I were texting, and we were eating, and I looked at my son and I said, "What stories have I told you about your Aunt Susan? Do you remember?" And just few stories. And what always bothered me, now I'm living it, is that I thought, now that Susan's dead, I've got nobody to rat on me for all the
Mhm.
stupid shit I did as a young guy, right? All the stupid stuff I did. Um, because you do. You can't get away with it. I was an angel. Oh, I was this, I was that. No, you weren't. You did
Mhm.
this, you son of a gun. Blah, blah, blah. I remember when you cut my Barbie's head off and flushed it down the
Oh,
toilet.
yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. You sank my Ken doll out in the lake in a shoebox. You told me you'd get me
Oh, poor
another one.
Ken.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Poor Ken sitting at the bottom of a Lake Bradford like this, sitting in his grave,
Oh.
Titanic grave. But yeah, so all those stories that I've never that I've never mentioned probably to my kids. And maybe something will jog my
Mm.
memory one day and I'll say something, but I don't talk about my sister near enough, I think, or about some of the stories of growing up in childhood that I should. And I regret
Well,
that
maybe
I
you still
haven't.
can, right? You still
Yeah, I still
can.
can, but those memories a lot of them have faded, I hate to say.
Right. Yeah. No,
Something will
that's
jog
true.
the memory and you'll go, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And maybe
Right.
you tell that same thing because that's the only thing you can remember.
And
Um,
again, it's before social media, right? So you didn't have
right.
Facebook memories reminding you of all these things. You have to just either have actual photos or remember them, and so it's different. Things
Yeah.
get lost that way. I
Oh,
love that you still say Aunt Susan though to your kids, and we did that with Michael. He was always Uncle Michael. He was always a part of our family story. His picture was in their nursery when they were babies, and
mhm.
all of this because we just kept sort of incorporating him. And it's like, okay, some of our family lives here and some of our family lives in heaven, and that's how we talked about it.
Yeah.
you know and kind of, I don't know if it's like normalizing it, but it's being much more open about death than I think other families just don't talk about it or don't need to talk about it. I don't know.
You know,
So
I mean, I have discovered that there are families that when like we return lost medals, Purple Hearts, lost
mm,
medals of valor, and there were families where he was 17, 18 years old, died, waist gunner on B-17 in Europe, got shot down, killed, and they
mm,
just never talked about him again. The family
yeah,
just it was like he ceased to exist at that
right,
moment in time. And everybody else kept growing and
right,
having families, but nobody ever talked about Uncle Eddie who died in a
hmm,
B-17 in the war. And I'm afraid there are probably lots of families out there that don't know
right,
how to handle the grief, so they
right.
choose not to talk about it, thinking that's the best.
Well, and I
That
think it's like the hardest thing ever, right? It's the hardest thing ever to lose a child. It's the hardest thing to lose a sibling. And I'm so glad that my family did talk about it. But I can almost understand where some people are like, we can't do that. We have no capacity to deal with the magnitude. And so we're just gonna keep walking and not have pictures out. I mean, I hear that too. And I do hear, because maybe some of your listeners can relate, that their parents don't want to talk about or can't talk about the child they lost, but the sibling wants to. The sibling
yeah.
wants their pictures around. They want to talk about the stories, and that's hard when families aren't on the same page with how they're coping or handling, the loss of a sibling or a child. So,
Yeah, it's tough.
you
The
know,
loss of a child can either drive the parents closer
yeah.
or it's the wedge that causes them to split
Split
apart.
up. Mhm.
So
But
I tend
again, it's like right, and I think as siblings though, like we forever hold them in our heart, right? They're just
yeah.
always still a part of our life experiences, and when we think of having a brother or sister, like that they're there. Like just because we can't physically see them doesn't mean that they never existed.
Right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
here's to them. Here's to them.
Woo! I'm gonna go get my wine now. Man, absolutely. No,
I figure
yeah.
if Joe Rogan can smoke a cigar and drink whiskey during his podcast, well, by God, tonight I can share a glass of wine with you and talk about my
Yes,
sister and talk about Michael. Because literally,
absolutely.
I could substitute everything in your book that you went through and substitute Michael for Susan, and this
Wow.
is my life.
Wow. Well, and I'll mention for anyone who likes listening to books, it's on Audible too. I
Oh,
purposely wanted it in all formats. If people like their Kindles, it's on Kindle. Um,
nice.
so, and the physical book, of course. So,
Well,
yeah.
does anybody have any questions for Dawn? And if you have it, now's the time to answer it. It's going to go, it'll be recorded. If you missed the first half, you can always go back and it'll be on YouTube and Facebook. Um, I am one day going to put all of my stuff on Apple because I have about 170 shows now, not
Wow.
counting some other ones, but I don't have them numbered. And then I just realized I looked in there. I interviewed Sammy Davis, he's Medal of Honor recipient. I interviewed another guy and I labeled them both episode 164. So I have 164s, but
That's
just different
funny.
titles. So I'm getting old, man.
Wow.
I think that's what it is,
Oh,
Don.
oh,
Well,
I feel like I'm getting old too.
if you ever fly through Texas, through Fort Worth, Texas, and you fly on the A Team American, let me know. And I look forward to hopefully having you on one of my flights one day.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on. I so appreciate meeting you and talking with you about our siblings and Mark for setting this up and connecting us. And it's wonderful to get to talk about Susan and Michael, right?
Exactly.
We don't get
Keep
enough
the memory alive.
opportunities.
Well,
Mhm.
Melanie got a lot out of this, lots of unexpected many tears. Thank you both. Melanie, I almost lost it a couple times there. I got to keep. I actually brought paper towels with me so that
Oh.
if I started to cry, I'd make it go like this for a second and get it really big, and then I could wipe my tears away and then come back. But quiver in my voice went away, so I think I'm good. Listen,
Oh.
you have a great one, Dawn. I'm going to share this with RTAG, these guys, the Rotor to Airline Group, and it's an aviation charity. A lot of them were dust off guys, and a lot of them
Wow.
probably knew your brother. So
Wow.
and the crew that died that day. So
Mm.
I'm sure they would love to see you. Anyway,
Yeah, that would be
you
great. Thank you
you
so
have
much.
a great one, and I will definitely catch up with you soon. All right.
Thank you
I'm
so
gonna drop
much,
you off. Just
Taco.
hey, just hang with me for a minute, okay? I'm gonna say
Okay.
goodbye, and then I'm gonna catch up with you in a sec. Hold on.
Sounds
Folks, thanks again for joining me. We both belong to a club. We have a T-shirt, and I hope and pray that you guys never have to go through that. Eventually, we all die, and usually your parents, if everything goes according to plan, because it's never right for the parent to lose a child. But then eventually, it's you and your siblings, and then who outlasts who. Um, and then when you get to the end of the race and it's your time to go, I pray that it's a reunion with our best friends. So, for all of you out there, thank you so much for joining us. It means a lot to me. Um, I've written about this on my website, The Sandgram. I've talked about my sister's death and the impact that it had on me. Writing definitely helped. Um, Sometimes those things are hard to put pen to paper, but you have to do it and share it. So, as we talked about with Dawn, make sure that you pick up the phone and call the parents or the sibling of somebody you know who has died and just let them know that you're thinking about their son or daughter and how much they meant to you. Funny story. You will not be bothering them in the slightest, and they will cherish that phone call forever and ever. I promise you that. All right, guys, until I see you again next week, adios, hasta luego, sa wiedersehen, tschüss, shesheni, au revoir, domo arigato gozaimasu, tando, shinde, kudasai, ciao, arrivederci, tashikor, assalamu alaikum, mahala, do widzenia, das vidania. I think I got them all. Ciao. All right, see ya.
Thanks.